Welcome to the No Quit Living podcast. Our primary objective is to motivate and inspire our listeners to never quit. The reality of life is simple. We all fall. We all fail. At times, we get knocked down. The question is, do we get back up? Are we stronger? Are we better prepared to attain the maximum of our potential? Thank you for joining our No Quit tribe. As you go for your greatness today, never quit. And remember, we rise by lifting others up. Welcome to episode number 268 of the No Quit Living podcast. I'm your host, Christopher J. Worth, and today's theme of the day is extreme ownership. Our quote of the day comes to us from Jocko Willink. You must own everything in your world. There is no one else to blame. I actually met today's guest on Instagram, and we've quickly become friends. A couple of weeks ago, I had the privilege of being on his podcast, and I'm excited to have Cale Marker share her story with us. I hope you enjoy today's episode. Cale, I'd like to welcome you to the No Quit Living podcast.
Hey, man. Thanks you for having me, Chris. I'm really happy to be here. Super happy to have you get a hold of me and be on the show.
I appreciate it. So the first question I ask everybody is, are you ready to positively impact at least one person today?
Of course, man. That's why I wake up every day.
Love it. So the number one objective of our show is to motivate and inspire listeners to never quit. And I was curious if you have either a no-quit story yourself or perhaps a really challenging time in your life where you could have given up or given in, but you didn't.
Does the last decade count?
I think it probably does for many of us.
I would say this story, and I'll keep it short for everybody. But the time really would have been the last decade of my life. Really getting outside. I'm 29 years old, and getting outside of the nest, if you will, outside of my family, and really out on my own. I played college baseball. I actually went to a couple different schools and played at that level, and was always a part of a team. And then when I got out of that, I actually was pretty lost. I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I finished 2 years of baseball and kind of got out and was really adamant about being more mature than what I was. So, for example, here, Chris, is I wanted to be 10 years ahead of where I was at. So I actually went into work. I went in to start a family. I wanted to get married. So by the age of 21, I actually had my first child, working full-time for my dad's family business there. And at 22, I got married, moved to a new town, and opened up a CrossFit gym. Literally, Chris, I moved my family on a Friday to a new town, and my first class for CrossFit was on a Monday. And I was 22 years old. I had a little bit of money, and I kicked down the door and I said, hey, I'm ready to start this business. And the reason I share this story is because in my mind, I thought I could literally achieve everything. I thought I could start a new family. I could have, a new kid. I could move to a new town, start a new business that no one in the town would ever heard of. Literally super naive, and was like, I can do it. And so for a short while I did. And it quickly turned. About 2-3 years into the business, I was working easily 90-hour work weeks. It was no sweat to wake up at 4 a.m, run some classes, go home, grab some breakfast, and then back for the rest of the day until 9 o'clock at night when I was mopping and closing the gym. And at this point in time, we actually had our second child, and I started to get really depressed. I started resorting to what was the only emotion I really knew how to express, which was anger. And so I started becoming a person, quite frankly, and I'm actually I'm happy that I listened to Damon West's podcast on your show earlier, because his radical honesty was something that I was kind of pondering what we would talk about on the show, and I became a person that yelled, would belittle, would control, even got physically abusive, and completely lost touch with if I went back to like my high school, a lot of times I was goofy, I was playful, I was happy, and I completely lost who that person was. I I didn't actually even look in the mirror for, I would say, a solid 18 months. It would be always looking away. And so it really got to a point of really asking myself, do I want to be here? Do I want to actually live on this life? Yeah, I at that time, Chris, I had a gym. It was being successful was my full-time job. I got into it because I wanted to be fit, healthy, and I thought that was happiness. It was the furthest thing from happiness there. And so it really got to the point where I went to the kitchen one day after doing a class, and my wife and 2 kids, now at this time had 2 kids, were gone. And I came into a note that said, if you want to see the kids, you'll need to make arrangements. We're staying at my parents' house. And that man was a real shocker. It was a wake-up call to say, hey, like something's not right here. And at the time, I still wasn't mature enough. I definitely played the victim mentality. And to your point, you and I have had conversations offline here. Just life doesn't happen to you, it happens for you. And that was one of those real moments. But I didn't recognize it at the time, and definitely played that victim role. And when I would go to class or I'd talk to my friends or my family, I really victimized myself by attacking her verbally and talking bad about her. Fast forward into another year, we actually started to build our relationship. I really wanted to build that family and do the best I could. Still working 90 hours a week, man. I was just smoked. I didn't spend any time working on myself, developing myself, and developing these emotions that I had no control over. And so we tried it for a little bit, but got right back into it. And I got to the point where I just said, screw everything. And actually, not to be literal, but that's actually what I started doing. I started going outside the marriage. I started being with other women. Some of them were in relationships, some of them weren't. So I was disrespecting not only myself, but my relationship with my wife at the time, friends and family, but the gym members I had, and those spouses of the other people. And it was just really an all-time low. And I actually met a friend. I was like, through Facebook, he would work some of the events I had, and I just saw him transform his life online. And so I reached out to that guy, and he really just focused on saying, you have to control what you have to control. And at that time, honestly, I started taking extreme ownership for my life, which was very, very difficult to go through. And so I really would say, to wrap that up, Chris, is my no-quit story is that there was a time where I resorted only to anger, and that I contemplated suicide on a very frequent basis. And thankfully, I have two loving boys that honestly were there in my rocks. I get a little choked up here. I can vividly remember laying in a bed and I started sobbing. I started crying so much. And my oldest boy, Finnegan, just literally hugged me, didn't say a word, just hugged me. And it was like, that was supposed to be the other way around, like I'm supposed to be there for him. And so actually my kids are my biggest teachers and my biggest inspiration. So when you talk about no quit living, it's really, I'm inspired to be the best dad and best version of myself. And ultimately, what I've learned through all of this, Chris, is that in order to be the best dad I could ever be, I have to be the best version of me. I have to be the best version of me first before I can serve any of the athletes that I had in my gym, before I could serve my friends, my family, my spouse, my partner, or my kids, that I actually had to focus on myself, like my buddy told me. And so that's what I've been out doing for the last 3 years. I actually sold the gym and moved on to really focusing in and reading some books. I actually didn't read my first book till I was about 25, 26. So I'll wrap it up there.
Wow, I truly appreciate not only your candor, but your honesty you share in your story. And I think one thing that you touched on near the end, I just want to focus on for a second, is I've gone through a tough time in my personal life as well. Some of the listeners know it, and some people don't fully know it. But I think what you said at the end was spot on, is it's okay to want to be the best version of a father, a mother, an employee, a partner, a friend, fill in the blank. Those things are unbelievably important, and I think it's something that we all can do and should do. But before you can be the best version of a parent, a father, husband, wife, fill in the blank, you have to be the best version of yourself, and you have to continually work on that. And I think that's something that I too didn't fully understand as I have 3 young kids myself, where you want to be the best dad, you want to be the best partner, you want to be the best friend, spouse, but you also have to work on yourself. And I think a lot of people don't fully understand that it's not a 24-hour job where you have to wake up and just be continually working on yourself and not take any time for other people. But the reality is, if you focus on 100% of your time and efforts on something else, the reality is you don't have time for other things. So I'm super appreciative of you sharing that. So interesting question, because we love adding value to our listeners, and I'm a huge reader myself. During the time when you started reading, is there a book or two that really stood out as far as being influential, or is there something that you've read recently that you'd like to recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, I was actually thinking about this in the shower last night, because obviously I've been listening to some of the podcasts, and so I knew this question was coming up. And really the book that was gifted to me was a book by John Acuff, and it was Start. And, for me as a person, I told you about the story of me just kind of kicking down the door and opening the gym. It wasn't something I'd say I'm highly risk adverse. I put myself in situations that way. But this was a different type of book for me. It was about me. It was actually starting the things not for mom and dad and what they want from me, or not what the community wants from me, but actually what I want for my life, and to actually start leaning into that. So I definitely would say that was a book that transformed everything. I mean, I've read a lot more books since then. As far as something that I'm reading now, I'm actually listening to or reading High Performance Habits by Brendon Burchard, and finding a lot of value. I'm actually taking my time through that and really sitting with all the questions and working slowly through the book to really identify kind of where I'm going. I've chewed through so many books here, man. That's a tough question to choose from. But I would have to say Start is something, when you're looking at talking about my story and sharing my story, and you even talked about it, Chris, is like, it's not a 24-hour thing where you have to spend all day. Honestly, for me, I have a morning routine, and those first 2 hours of my day are for me. And I make sure that I get up early, and that way it doesn't disrupt, my relationship with my partner. It doesn't really upset the relationship with my kids. And so those first 2 hours every single day are something that I can hold myself accountable for. And lastly, I have a routine where I do everything in the evening. I have a half-hour block of preparing myself for my sleep. And kind of reflecting on the day.
You actually answered 2 questions in one, and you jumped ahead, which is awesome. But I want to pick your brain real quick on the evening routine, and the reason is, over the last almost 300 episodes, whenever we've had a guest, I always ask about a morning routine, and the reason being is onefold, always looking to add value to our listeners and just introduce them to new ideas. And the thing I love about that question, it's not a right or wrong answer. There's not one routine that works for everybody. But the reason I'm intrigued about your evening routine is, probably about a year or so ago, all of a sudden, quite a few of my guests started talking about, well, Chris, I do have a morning routine, but it actually starts the night before. And I don't think that it wasn't that I was blind to it, but I didn't realize and now I've started doing myself, is the importance of how you wind down your night, your day, how you review it and get ready for the next day. It all of a sudden, it just starts that rhythm. So definitely have to ask if you wouldn't mind just telling our listeners a little bit about your evening routine.
Absolutely. And it's pretty simple for me. So one just starts with, first and foremost, I was terrified of routines up until 2 years ago. I felt like I was trapped. So routines for me, it was a really terrifying thing. So if anybody kind of feels that way, I've been on that side of that. But for my evening routine, it's pretty simple. I go through and prepare for my morning routine. So I tidy up the space. So that could be anything that's left out from the kitchen, the living room, that supports me getting up and being active throughout the morning. So for me, it's tidying up the space, my living environment, and then setting and then preparing. So for me, my morning routine includes drinking water. Something I've kind of always struggled with is drinking enough water. So I actually make sure the water is filled. I'll make sure the cup is out, and I'll make sure that that's there. So it's really preparing that. So it's tidying up and then setting myself up for success tomorrow. So one of the things I've learned, Chris, is that, when you wake up, your brain is the most active to solve the biggest, most challenging problems. So I don't want to solve little tedious problems. And whereas night, winding down and calming down is a perfect time to do that cleaning up. So my evening routine, to wrap that up, is I actually journal. So I reflect. So there's five areas of my life that I take focus on, and that I want to make sure that I'm growing in every single day, and I'm acknowledging that growth. For you, you're a high performer. I'm a high performer. You're a college athlete. You're a former college athlete. I am. We're really good at self-shaming and beating ourselves up and never really acknowledging the progress that we've made. So in order to keep my spirits high and actually see progress towards my goals, I make sure that I journal on those 5 areas. And for me, I'll share those. It's just personal. What am I doing for my mind, my body, my spirit? That's focus number 1. Focus number 2 is a partner. So I'm in a relationship. What did I do today to grow as a partner? And then I go down a list as a parent, and what falls in the parent is more family. So as they say, I have kids, but also I'm a son. So am I talking to my mom? Am I talking to my dad? Am I talking to my siblings? So what am I doing in that realm? So it's really family. And the last 2 is a provider. What am I doing in the career or from a financial standpoint to provide safety and security for my family? So that's the 4th one. And the last one is a player. Like, what am I doing to enjoy my life? What am I doing to have blissful interactions, magical moments, right? Am I doing the things that I like to do? I'm an outdoors guy. I like to rock climb. I like to get on the river. I like to bike. I like to, try new things. So what am I doing in that realm too? It's very easy as a workaholic or former workaholic to get trapped in those moments where I don't take moments of joy. So those are the 5 areas that I literally, and some days, man, it's like, hey, I took out the trash, and that makes me a good partner. And then other times I have a lot more to say, and the whole point is it's the consistency over time to create that sustained long-term happiness.
I love that word you just used, consistency. And I appreciate you sharing not only your morning routine, but your evening routine. And you said something that I wanted to just briefly touch on for a second, is you spoke about how up until about 2 years ago, you were terrified about routines. And I think it's why I love the word consistency. And I've had so many people that have been on the show that have been unbelievably transparent with their morning and evening routines. And some of the ones that I've really connected with are the ones that focus on the fact that every single day I don't have that hour, 2 hours, or 3 hours. That's life. I got kids, work, and sometimes you don't have the ability. But what so many people have touched upon is being consistent. So for example, your morning routine is 2 hours. Let's just say we're doing some business event, we're speaking together, you don't have the 2 hours and you only have 20 minutes that day. It's still better to control the controllables for those 20 minutes. And it goes back to the word that you said is consistency. And what I love about the morning routine, evening routine, and people that have these very specific things that they track is the most important word I feel is always consistency. It's not perfection. It's not never missing a day, or if you want to have 30 minutes for this and 20 minutes for that every single day, you do exactly 30 and 20. No, it's the reality that life hits you, and we're going through one of those life hits you moments right now. So I wanted to jump into my next question is, how have you stayed mentally positive, and how have you stayed positive during these challenging times with the coronavirus and what we're all dealing with? And I heard an interesting kind of comparison that I hadn't heard before. A good friend of mine, Dana, said that the reality is we all might have a different boat right now, but we're all going through the exact same storm. We're all in that same body of water. So I wanted to just kind of ask you that. It's probably like 3 questions in one.
Well, I definitely agree. So the first thing you kind of mentioned there was routines being frightening to me. I think unlike most people, I like to feel freedom. And so a routine felt like I was going to wake up one day and just be in the Truman Show, and that everything was going to be the same and I would miss my life. And I wanted to be super present. And what I actually learned through the morning routine and evening routine, and it's talked about, in business books, it's talked about even in yoga, is it's like to have the same bedtime, wake time. So consistency and routines are very important. And what I've learned throughout all this is that actually gives me a frame of mind to be free. Like just having small routine has helped me there. One of the things you asked me is how do I keep that on? Like, let's just say I have a speaking engagement, and a couple of things come to mind. If I did not, I'll play that. If I did not have if I only had 20 minutes, my routine is still has the ability to be 4 hours long if it needed to, right? And it has the ability to shrink down. And there's just really certain checkpoints that I have. And I actually do my morning routine when I'm feel drained. So I'll do it, at lunchtime. I'll do it at dinner time, just to kind of transition throughout the day. So I use that. But one of the things that you asked me was, what is something that I do to stay consistent or keep a positive mindset? And for me, it's an acronym that I heard, which is WIN, which is what's important now. And the power of questions, put the focus on that. So I attempt really strongly to have strong self-awareness. It's actually one of the things that I'm focused on the most right now, is how to cultivate that in myself, and to be hyper aware of the decisions I'm making. I think it's Ed Milet says that most general people will look at their weekly or monthly schedules, and then they'll check their, what they have going on, and then they'll cross-reference, how'd I do this month? And he said, higher performers do that on a weekly basis or a daily basis, and then the highest of performers do it on an hourly basis. And so I'm really trying to take that to heart and say, okay, well, what have I done the last hour? Is it in the direction that I'm going? And what can I do to make it better? Or what's important now? Keeping the main thing. And so a large part of everything I do is self-awareness into questions. Then just leaning into that and taking action based upon the answer or the intuition that comes through me at that point in time.
I love that acronym, and it's something that I've heard, and it's interesting. You look at it, win, and you almost go back to sports days and trying to quote unquote win every game, win every event. And the reality is it has nothing to do with winning or losing. It has to do with what's the most important thing right now. And we've all heard different people talk about, something that's not the most important thing shouldn't come before what's the most important thing. And I think when you go through your day and you try to maximize it and you try to take advantage of it, I think that's when you have a better control of it. And you had spoken about journaling quite a bit on your morning and evening routine, and ironically, that's how you and I got connected. And I believe you have a journal that you're actually working on, and I wanted to if you wouldn't mind just briefly touching on it with our listeners.
Yeah, thank you. And it's kind of ironic that that's kind of what how we came about. I'm actually working on a pre-launch right now of the journal, and because of that, I've actually given a 30-day free fillable template on my website there. So we're in pre-launch right now. We're actually just getting the right look and feel of the journal. So we're really working hard behind the scenes to really, like I said, get the touch and feel of that. But the journal itself it was born through necessity. Literally, like the frameworks, you asked me before the show, is it a planner? Is it a journal? And it's frameworks. It's an accountability partner. It's your mentor. It's your guide. Like I said earlier, I don't like to feel trapped. So I built the journal around the frameworks that help me get out of a certain situation and into a new situation that has created daily and more moments of happiness through my life. So, and it's really focused on the 5 key areas that I mentioned earlier, as a person, mind, body, spirit, as a partner, a parent, a provider, and a player. And it's really using the power of questions and awareness to keep alignment with your goals. And so I kind of spoke about and shared the story with you, Chris, about, how I got super depressed, and shared with the audience here that journey that I went through. And the reality is I didn't have intentions to do that. I didn't have intentions to be, an abusive, cheating husband who ends up going through divorce and then later down bankruptcy. None of that is what I intended to do. I intended to win by living a happy life, being a great dad, being a great partner, and great community member. All those were my intentions, and intentions are great, but unless they're backed up by accountability and actions, they're really meaningless. And so what I had to really do is I took a long 2-3 hour barefoot walk in the woods, and I'm like, who am I? What am I here? Is this who I am? Am I just this trashy guy, or am I something else? Because they're not aligning with my intention. So I actually created the journal when I was actually in my relationship that I am now, and that failed, and she kicked me out. And that's when I went walking in the woods. I was like, I need a system to hold myself accountable, and I need to The quote, I think, Chris, is like, you are who you spend, the 5 people you spend the most time with. And what I realized is I never spent time by myself. I always spent time with other people. So, man, I was lost. So the first thing I had to do was get really clear on who I was. And so that's what I used questions for. And so some of those frameworks are inside the journal. And then the next thing is to be accountable. The journal is there because it doesn't lie. I ask myself, hey, what did I do to become a better dad today? What did I do? What did I do to be a better parent or a partner today? And I don't look at those answers as like, self-sabotaging, where I'm like, I didn't do anything today. It's like, okay, you didn't do anything today, or you didn't do quite enough, but that's okay. You can see it because it's not 3 months, and it's not the point where it's at eruption. That's where I let everything get. And the beauty of the journal is that it just is super easy. And when I say journal, like, I think you probably access the free thing, and I've heard from some people that it can be quite a bit. And honestly, it's just there as an accountability. I fill it out sometimes with one word. It's just the consistent we talked about. I show up with it every single day because I have to be honest with it. And when I'm honest with it, I'm honest with myself, I can make those changes to my behaviors throughout the day. So that's kind of the journal. And so, yeah, I appreciate the little plug on that.
No, I love that. And again, going back to using the same word that we spoke about, the morning routine and the evening routine is consistency. And I have a daily 2-pager that I use with myself. I've been using it for the last year plus, and I use it with my clients. It's free, downloadable on my website. But for me, a lot of people have spoken about, well, I see it's a lot, and then at night I do the evening part, and it becomes overwhelming. And what you just said is the consistency perspective of, there are days when it might be one word. There are days when you write or you have a lot to do. But I think the biggest thing for me was being analytical in the positive way. And what I mean by that is maybe the prior day you had a really good day as a parent or a spouse or with your business, and it's just one of those days. But then today, maybe it's one of those days where just it got busy and you didn't have the ability to do what you wanted to do. I'm not in any way saying ignore that and say, oh, who cares? What I'm saying is by being consistent, you look at it and say, okay, yesterday was a really great day. Today I didn't really get to focus on as much time with my kid or my wife or my husband. So maybe as you're doing the evening routine and you're laying out the next day, you say, you know what, I want to spend a couple minutes tomorrow morning and maybe pick up the phone and call my mom, or maybe reach out to a friend. And I think that's really powerful that you touch on that. So an interesting question we ask everybody is, if you had to define yourself, but you could only use one word, what word would you pick?
I was so confused about this question until now. And it's tenacious. I would say tenacious. It literally, as soon as you finish the question, man, I really had no answer. I was like, what is that question? What am I going to answer that? And honestly, tenacious. And it's funny because I actually had a friend who's a metal worker and a yoga buddy, and he actually had a bracelet on, and he's like, this is calling your name. And he just put it on my wrist, and it said tenacious on it. So there must be something to that.
That's awesome. And not that the viewers can see, but I have 2 bracelets, our No Quit Living ones, and it's everything is #accountability. So if you could go back and give the 20-year-old version of yourself just one piece of advice, what would it be?
Slow down. Breathe. Yeah. Patience.
I think slow down is something that, being a former athlete myself and a former college coach, is something that we all should do more of. And I think during this pandemic we're in now, I think by choice, we've had no choice in some ways to just be forced to slow down. And I think at first people were, going nuts in the sense of like, what am I doing? How can I do this? But I think me personally, and a lot of my clients, they've enjoyed some of this time that they get to embrace. And you mentioned going outside. I've always been an outside person as far as growing up playing a bunch of sports and doing stuff, but can honestly say over the last couple of years, kind of got away from it. And I don't mean not going outside at all, but definitely took my kids to parks and things. But during this time, I've been spending a lot of time with the kids, bike riding, parks, just playing outdoors, and it's been really interesting. So if I had the ability to grant you dinner with anybody, dead or alive, who would you pick?
This is another question I was thinking about. I'm going to have to go with my original answer. For me, it's probably going to seem weird to the audience maybe, but it's Adam Sandler. Like there's not a person that pretty much my whole life, he's been an influence in my life. he's been a source of like, one, Adam Sandler is like super hilarious. He's funny. He's, he doesn't have to be crazy raunchy with his content to be funny. He's a true artist. And the one thing I actually loved about everything Adam Sandler does is he's always bringing his friends with him. And that has just always stuck with me. And then the thing about Adam Sandler is he's talking about real life. Like, I feel like a lot of his movies, and I could be way off, but this is just how I have the perspective of it. A lot of it are dealing with life things. And I don't know if they're relative to people in his life or his life in general, but there's some real perspective there. And so I would love to be able to have some dinner with that guy. Probably would be fried chicken or something.
All right, you can only watch one Adam Sandler movie, and your choices are Billy Madison or Happy Gilmore. Which one do you pick?
You can only watch one. Billy Madison.
Laugh at Billy Madison. Go see Billy. All right, so for our listeners, what is the best way for them to connect, follow you, or find out more about you, as well as your social media handles? And also, if anybody wants to get that free downloadable preview of your journal, what's the best way for them to do all that together?
Yeah, I've tried to make everything super simple to access to anything that I have. So there's I have a Linktree account, so it's linktr .ee/Cale Marker. That's CaleMarker. All my links are there. For the free PDF, it's gap5.com. It's GAPFIVE.com. And then for social handles, I have most everything there. It's all Cale Marker, except on Instagram. I think it's Cale J Marker. And I'm open to everyone kind of communicating me on whatever platform suits their needs best.
Awesome. And then last question we ask everybody is if you have some parting words you'd like to leave with our listeners today.
Parting words is, I think just based on our conversation, is focus on yourself first, and then find a way to serve other people with your own gifts. For me, I didn't know that I actually had value to give. And the reality is if my kids at 5 and 7 have a lot to teach us, I think we all have a lot to teach. So put yourself out there. A lot of the best things in my life have came from just being honest and telling my story. So share your story. There's a lot of value in that. People need it. And we are just a big world of people. And the more positivity we can share through your stories and connect, the more open we are, the more vulnerable we are, I believe the better society we'll have. And that would be my words there, Chris.
I appreciate it, man. I'm so glad that we got a chance to connect. And one thing I'll just say to our listeners is, social media has a lot of different connotations, and I know a lot of people knock it down as far as just negativity and those type of things. But I can tell you that based on the algorithms, based on the things that you like, the people you follow, the things that you comment on, it puts into different systems and different things get put in front of you. And the reason I share that is because I'm an avid person, I'm an avid journal, planner, calendar follower, and obviously we have our own 2-pager. Based on those things, I get different things put in front of me, and 100% the reason we are connecting today is because you have a journal, and it's something that I've worked on myself and something I've been a follower of. So for our listeners out there, don't be afraid to connect with people. And if you are really active in a positive way by the things you like, the people you follow, and the comments you make, things are going to be put in front of you. That's first. But the second piece is you have to go ahead and take action. So again, I truly, truly appreciate what you shared on today's episode. I know that you and I will connect again soon. And for our listeners, I would highly recommend that you follow Cale and check out his, not only his journal, but also the stuff that he preaches and puts out on a daily basis.
Man, I appreciate you so much. I appreciate everyone who tunes into this podcast. Just really leaning into appreciation for everyone. Super thankful. And we will certainly connect more offline.
Thank you for listening to episode number 268. I've really enjoyed getting to know Cale, and I hope his story impacted you today. His transparency and candor during those dark times is not only extremely refreshing, but incredibly powerful. It reminds me of a famous quote, "The comeback is always greater than the setback." In Cale's parting words, he suggested that we all focus on ourselves first and then find a way to serve other people. Perfect advice for what we are going through today during this pandemic. So I challenge you to focus on you, then serve others, and remember, we rise by lifting others up. And lastly, to our listeners, thank you. We truly appreciate your time, and we hope our episodes inspire you to keep on attacking life and never giving up. To quote Dr. Norman Vincent Peale, it's always too early to quit.